How's everyone this evening?
Nice to see you, Len.
Good afternoon, everyone. So much for joining us today for the 2021 Shelter AGM. O'Neill, Chair of the Board for Shelter Nova Scotia. I'd like to make a big warm welcome to all board members, employees, volunteers, donors, funders, and of course, all those in support. So I'd first like to start off by introducing all board members. For some reason, my camera turned off, but that's all right. We'll keep going. I'd like to introduce all board members, and I'd like to start with Kathy Gillis. If you can just give a quick wave. Kathy, perfect. Next, we have Jeremy Jackson. Hey, Jeremy. David Boone, Halifax Police. All right. Margaret Cameron. Next, we have Jeff Franklin, top, Chelsea King, Lynn Hartwell. I see you hobbled in on a cane, so we'll have to talk about that later. Deborah Page. And last but not least, Dennis. So welcome to the board members and welcome everyone to today's AGM. I'd first like to start off by making a land acknowledgement. Land acknowledgements do not exist in just a historical context. Colonialism is a current ongoing process, and we need to examine our present participation. We welcome you to the Shelter Nova Scotia 2020-2021 Annual General Meeting, and I would like to take a moment to reflect on the following. Shelter Nova Scotia is located on Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of Mi'kmaq. We are all treaty people, treaties of peace and of friendship. June is National Indigenous History Month. Days before June 1st, what is meant to be a month of honor, reflection, and restoration, we learned of 250 children's bodies being discovered by radar, buried decades ago on the grounds of a residential school in British Columbia. Discussions and investigations are now underway to determine if the same has happened here in Nova Scotia. At the same time, there are over 50 strong communities in Nova Scotia where descendants of Africans have made a life and contributed to our province in every way, most of whose ancestors did not ask to come here. They arrived as part of the slave trade. It is therefore important to understand the long-standing history that has brought us to live in Nova Scotia and to understand our place within that history and our commitments to influence the future. I'd first like to start by introducing our first guest speaker. For some reason, my camera is turned off because Dr. Strang, I was going to show you my favorite tie, but I can't because my camera got turned off, and I don't know why that is. Oh, now. Doctor of Health, leading us safely through COVID-19 pandemic. He's also a very special friend to Shelter Nova Scotia and is the original and standing member of our Herring Cove Apartments Advisory Committee. And I see, Dr. Strang, you're wearing the Montreal Canadiens tie that we had sent over to you. I'm a huge Leafs fan, and it took a lot out of me to purchase a Montreal Canadiens tie, but I see you're wearing it proudly. So again, welcome, Dr. Strang, and we look forward to hearing from you. Go ahead.
So thank you very much, Jamie, and thank you for the tie. I did put it on, but I first want to acknowledge Linda Wilson. So there's another tie I have on, my lion tie. So it was Linda Wilson actually who inspired myself and my colleague Tracy Barbrick around lion thinking, that we all want to be lions until we need to be, and then you have to step up. And her little parable that I heard through Tracy was that the wind said to the warrior that there's a storm coming, and the warrior's response was, "We are the storm and we will roar back." So I put those two together to my kind of encourage Nova Scotians to be lions and to roar back at COVID. So Linda, this is for you. I have great admiration for Linda and for all the work, all the people at Shelter Nova Scotia. So it's a privilege for me to be with you briefly today, because you guys roar back around against homelessness. You roar back against social inequities on a regular daily basis. So, and I applaud you and admire you for that. I just want to, I won't be long. You have an AGM to get through, but there's a few reflections on COVID that I just want to share with you. But I want to start by acknowledging I very much recognize that the things that we have had to put in place, the restrictions to control COVID and save lives, I'm fully cognizant of all the impacts that they have had, and they certainly have had many impacts on, including people's economics, people's finances. They've exacerbated housing and homelessness situations. But when I look at how Shelter Nova Scotia as a leader within the sector dealing with underhoused people and homelessness, the way you've worked collaboratively with creativity and innovation to deal with this problem is nothing short of amazing. So thank you for that. But that to me is a hallmark of what Nova Scotia has done. We have, no matter what the issue, we've rallied around and said, how do we work together? Whether I've seen it, things that most people don't see within government behind the scenes, but how people have just come together across the health system. And we've just said, we get it. We've gotten out of our organizational kind of silos and just said, what do we need to do? What part can I play? We've been creative and innovative. We've been willing to take risks, try things out, and course correct along the way. So to me, there's some lessons learned in that. How can we do more of this to tackle other problems? And certainly affordable housing and homelessness is right up there for me as a priority. When people talk to me about what are the public health issues we have, so many ways they come back to affordable housing and homelessness as a root cause. So what is the opportunity that COVID has shown us, that how do we build on models like the hoteling model as ways that point to the future, that how can we think differently about both affordable housing and homelessness, and think beyond just a shelter type model. And I know Shelter Nova Scotia is not just shelters. You help people transition, and you have other forms of affordable housing. But I think more broadly, we need to think differently, and that the hoteling model for me is an opportunity how do we seize on that? And like we've done with COVID, we have a crisis. How can we mobilize around a crisis, be creative and innovative, and be solution oriented to make some long-term change? So that to me is a key opportunity out of COVID. A couple of other opportunities that I think Nova Scotians have answered the call to say, how can we need to be more caring and compassionate, put others first, put our communities ahead of our own needs, because that's how we keep each other safe. How do we stimulate and sustain that more compassionate, caring approach that we've used successfully through COVID? And the last piece is COVID has clearly identified social and health inequities. There are many in our parts of our community and we're now seeing the tail end of COVID is becoming like many other infectious diseases, where it's going to reside in those who are on the margins, more on the margins of society, people who are low income, people who have crowded housing, all those other issues. So how do we make sure that we don't forget the lessons on inequities that COVID has taught us, and stay focused on reducing those inequities moving forward? It's all about, I use the phrase, we're going to be different as we come out of COVID. Can we be better while we're being different? So I'll leave you with those kind of lessons, my reflections, but also there's some challenges and opportunities for all of us. And whatever, certainly dealing with homelessness and affordable housing is high up there on my agenda as a key public health issue. So I will continue to work with you, work with Linda Wilson, and with my colleagues across government, and how we can create some sustainable change. But thanks for the opportunity for me joining you today. And Linda, thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm hoping that my video and my voice is coming through. If not, please give me the thumbs down. Dr. Strang, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. You hit the nail on the head, right? It comes down to affordable housing, and that's definitely something that we are all greatly in support of. And thank you for switching out the tie. It was much easier to pay attention. The red and the blue was kind of throwing me off a little bit. So thank you so much for being here. We look forward to working with you and continuing to work with you in the months and the years to come. And a huge thank you to you and to your team for your tireless effort, for everything that you're doing for not only just our clients for Shelter Nova Scotia, but for Nova Scotia's residents right across the province. So thank you very much, and thank you for being here today.
Thanks for the opportunity. And Jamie, the tie's going back on later tonight.
Oh no! Yeah, well, it better, because they had a rough game for game one. So
well, go Habs! All right, thanks everybody. Take care.
Right, thank you very much. Great, thank you. All right, so we'd like to now move on to our next part of our agenda, and I'd like to hand over the reins to Tammy Smith. Tammy is our Director of Human Resources for Shelter Nova Scotia, and each year during our AGMs, we like to honor and recognize those employees that have had long-standing service with our organization. So Tammy, over to you.
Thanks, Jamie. Well, what a year. I've got a little bit of a report before we move on to the Years of Service Awards, but last year I closed my report by saying, as we chart our course forward in the months to come, with COVID at the forefront of everything we do, I trust that the passion and dedication of our employees will help us to find our new normal, and that we may reflect on this time with gratitude. I didn't realize then, what a ride we were in for, and I'm very humbled by the truth in those words. We have not settled into the new normal, but I think it's coming. And to adequately describe the experience of this past year, I really don't think I could. It's been without question the most difficult year for Shelter Nova Scotia to date, but it's also been one of the most amazing, awe-inspiring years. There have been tears of frustration, anger, fear, sadness, tears of joy, tears of relief. We've laughed until we've cried too, sometimes at the absurdity of the situations we've been in, and often at our own inability to effectively conquer the mute button or find a camera angle that doesn't look up your nose or at the top of your head. Through it all, we've remained grounded and grateful. We do continue to struggle to attract and retain qualified employees. We maintain a base of just over 100 employees, but are still turning over 30 plus employees each year. We are currently unable to offer a competitive wage for the work that's done, and this contributes to the high turnover. As mentioned in last year's report as well, employees at 5 of our facilities have received certification to become members of the Service Employees International Union, SEIU. I'm happy to report that after navigating the virtual collective bargaining process, a collective agreement was ratified in February of 2021. We look forward to strengthening the employment relationship in the coming year. We were approved for funding from the Graduate to Opportunity Program with the Department of Labor and Advanced Education. This program helps recent university and college graduates get full-time permanent positions by providing financial assistance to employers to hire graduates to newly created positions. The weight of the restrictions this year was felt with our students. Distancing protocols and employees working from home meant that we were unable to provide a safe and meaningful experience for students. And as a result, most of our student opportunities were canceled. We did have a social work student complete their placement with us, and we have several students from the Human Services Program and several campuses of NSCC completing their placements with us this spring. We're fortunate to have a student joining the central office team this summer as part of the Canada Summer Jobs Program through Employment and Social Development Canada. We're also looking forward to having students from the Cooperative Education Program supported through the Department of Labor and Advanced Education join us for their work terms in the fall. We're excited to welcome the students back. Students bring a fresh perspective, and we're grateful to have them as part of our team. So as we navigated through the COVID landscape, the leadership team rose to every challenge, pivoted with every obstacle, and led the organization through a year that I have yet to find the words to describe. This team is shaping our way forward and have demonstrated courage, strength, and grace at every turn. This small but mighty team is comprised of 18 Lions with a combined 178 years of experience with Shelter, Nova Scotia. Over the past year, many of our employees have shown their best selves. Our leadership team sent words that they felt described our employees. I think Braden is going to put up a slide now. So these are the words that describe our employees over the past year, all the time, but particularly over this past year. Words such as dedicated, resilient, brave, compassionate, tenacious, flexible. There's a lot of beautiful sentiments. I've often said that I'm in awe of our frontline employees, well, even more so now. With few exceptions, our employees showed up. They did what was needed again and again, providing skilled, compassionate care to our community's most vulnerable. So now we'll go through our years of service. For 25 years of service, we have John Connor. John is our facility coordinator at Metro Turning Point. Congratulations to John. 15 years of service, Darlene Lunn. Darlene is our Director of Community Corrections, and she's responsible for both correctional facilities and works out of Nehiley House. 10 years of service to Kate Billow. Kate is one of our shift supervisors at Barry House, and Rachel Salter, who is a support assistant at Barry House. Congratulations to you both. 5 years of service, Naomi Downey. Naomi is a support assistant at Barry House. Matthew Fultz is a support worker at Metro Turning Point. Cam McClellan is a support worker at Metro Turning Point. Brittany Sinclair is the house manager at Herring Cove Apartments. Rebecca Witzman is a client support assistant at Herring Cove Apartments. So 5 years, congratulations to all of you. We have 3 years of service with Taylor Armstrong. She's a shift supervisor at Barry House. Vanessa Cheverie, who is a support worker at Metro Turning Point. Sarah Coleman is the social worker at Barry House. Jessica Gesso is a client support assistant at the Rebuilding. Tanya Normington is an acting case manager at Nehiley House. Mary Schaefer is a support assistant at Metro Turning Point. Dave Shea, shift supervisor at Metro Turning Point. And Emily Wolf-Oulon is a shift supervisor at Metro Turning Point. So congratulations to all of you. I'm looking forward to reading more names again next year. So we're also grateful to receive funding to provide hourly wage top-ups to our employees working the front line during the most intense months of the pandemic. Shelter Nova Scotia received money from the Affordable Housing Association of Nova Scotia, or AHANS, the United Way Atlantic Compassion Fund, and a lump sum bonus was provided to shelter workers and was administered by the Department of Municipal Affairs and Housing. These funds helped us to recognize the selflessness of our employees. With a generous donation from the Ostrich Club, they cooked and provided the space. We were able to host a small dinner to celebrate some employees for showing up, rising up, and doing the hard work. So it's with a profound sense of gratitude and admiration that I look forward to the year to come. I have seen us move mountains.
Thank you so much, Tammy, and congratulations to everyone for your years of service. I know that, I wrote a chair report and it's in the AGM handout, but I'd just like to make a couple of quick comments before we move into the committee updates. I believe everybody knows what the facts of life are, right? Or more importantly, the Facts in Life show that was aired in the 1980s, so it's, everyone knows the whole thing. I don't want to get into singing, but, you take the good, you take the bad, you take them both, and there you have the facts of life. And when I think back at the last year and everything that this organization has gone through, I often think about the good and I often think about the bad. And you're probably thinking, how can you think of good when you're thinking of COVID? Well, I'm going to get to some areas where I think are good. But we can definitely start off with some of the bad areas. You know, COVID has had a negative impact on everybody here in Nova Scotia. And like Dr. Strang said, it really has a greater impact on those in our community that are vulnerable and making them even more so vulnerable. So, you know, so it's good if you own a home and your prices have skyrocketed this year, but it's not so good if you're on the other side. So those things that we have to be aware of. The lack of housing is another major issue that we have, and it's being exacerbated by COVID-19, and the impacts on our healthcare system is definitely a negative. You know, back in, you know, years ago now, 9/11, there was a definition of what a hero is. And a hero is the person that is running in the building that's, you know, on fire when everybody else is running out. And for Shelter Nova Scotia employees, you were that person running in the building. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart for all the work that you have done and continue to do to be at the front of the line and providing these services to our clients. So now I talk about, you know, well, what else came out from the good, right? So when we talk about COVID-19, what is good? The awareness that has happened this year is second to none. You know, it was encouraging to hear Dr. Strang mention that it's on, you know, top of mind when, you know, when he's talking to other leaders in government. And, you know, the awareness from a public relations perspective and the media coverage on the vulnerable communities throughout Nova Scotia has been great this year. I'm also pleased to announce that we had a stellar fundraising season. You know, so many Nova Scotians stepped up. Our funders contributed more and continue to support the organization and what we do. So that definitely was a good thing. We also we also had a reduction in beds, and this provided increased dignity and privacy and better staff to client ratios. So, from my perspective as chair of the board, just like to say a big thank you to everybody. So to begin the meeting officially, we'd like to move with the approval of the June 2020 annual general meeting minutes. Are there any questions from anybody about the minutes as presented? Seeing no questions, I'm going to ask for someone to move the minutes from last year. Thank you, Jeff. And seconder? Great, thank you. All agreed upon? All good? Excellent. All right. So within our board, we work within a governance model, and we have 3 working committees. Those committees are finance, audit, and risk. That's 1. Governance is the 2nd, and stakeholder relations is the 3rd. I'd like to start with finance, audit, and risk, and begin with Tara, as she is going to provide our report for the audited financial statements. Tara is Tara Spur with Lyle Tilly Davidson, and I pass the gauntlet on to you.
Thank you, Jamie. So we've prepared an audit of the financial statements for the year ended March 31st, 2021, and we've issued a qualified audit opinion. The qualification is a standard not-for-profit qualification for the so the statement of financial position is on page 3 of the financial statements and indicates an increase in the assets of the organization to 6.7 million from 5.9 million in the prior year. This is mainly due to an increase in cash and an increase in capital assets at year end. Liabilities have increased this year from 4.3 million in 2020 to 4.7 million in 2021. The largest contributor to this is the increase in deferred revenue, specifically the deferred revenue related to the new holiday wish list program, as well as an increase in deferred capital contributions related to funding received for capital projects that took place during the year. Net assets have increased this year from 1.59 million last year to 2 million in 2021. Due to the excess of revenue over expenses for the year of $431,904, as indicated on the statement of revenues and expenditures, which is on page 4 of the financial statements. So on the statement of revenue and expenditures, you will note that the revenues have increased this year to 5.4 million from 4.8 million last year due to an increased government funding as well as increased fundraising and donation revenue received during the year. As mentioned earlier, there was a significant increase in donations as more people became aware of the worsening housing crisis due to COVID-19. Expenditures increased this year from 4.7 million in 2020 to just over 5 million in 2021 due to increased costs of salaries, increased program costs, and increased household supplies, mainly due to the need to purchase personal protective equipment as well as sanitation and cleaning supplies. Dues and fees as well as fundraising expenses have also increased this year due to new donation management software being utilized and the need to purchase new cloud computing services. Other expenditures include amortization and a gain on the sale of the investments that were donated in the prior year. So overall, we found the financial statements and the records of the organization to be in good order. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much, Tara. I'd like now to pass it over. Does anybody have any questions for Tara? I should ask before. Any questions about the audited statements? I'm seeing none, hearing none. Thank you so much, Tara. Appreciate it. I'd like to now introduce Chelsea. Chelsea King is the Treasurer and Chair of the Finance, Audit and Risk Committee. Chelsea?
Thanks, Jamie. And also thank you, Tara, for your presentation and all the hard work you and your team put into the audit this year. It was the second year that we've had to do the audit virtually, so I know how much of a challenge that can be, and we really appreciate all of your team's hard work this year and last year, and hopefully next year we'll get to see you in person. I will just highlight a few things. These are points that are also outlined in my treasurer's report, and Tara touched on a few as well. First, as Tara mentioned on the statement of financial position, I wanted to mention that our investments were cashed out during the year, and we're currently in the process of drafting a new policy around investments in which any donated shares moving forward will be cashed out immediately as soon as they are received, as to avoid any market fluctuation risk or potential losses. The reason for, if you notice the prepaid expense balance on the statement of financial position is higher this year is due to the fact that we secured new office space before the end of the fiscal year, and there were some deposits that were paid prior to March 31st that are now recorded on our balance sheet. We also completed a lot of capital projects during the year, so that would include the snug conversions that took place at several of our facilities to adhere to the COVID-19 guidelines, as well as the implementation of HVAC systems at several of our facilities as well, in the hopes of reducing operating costs among many other projects. So that has resulted in a higher capital asset balance as well. And one of the bigger changes this year with regards to the financial statements is the fact that we've set up a new internally restricted fund this year, which you'll see under the net assets caption. We've split out the general fund and an internally restricted fund. So we do have a balance of $430,000 sitting in the internally restricted fund this year. The reason for this fund is to set aside a reserve for future operating costs, which have been internally restricted by the board of directors for specific uses over the next 3 to 5 years, which would be primarily related to the new office space that I just mentioned, as well as any leftover funds going towards necessary maintenance or capital projects. With regards to the statement of revenues and expenditures, like Tara and Jamie both mentioned, the main reason for the significant surplus that we're reporting this year is because of our fundraising and donations, which exceeded $800,000 in the current year compared to $282,000 in fiscal 2020. And this is thanks to all of our many gracious donors who have supported us throughout the last year and more, especially during the COVID-19 crisis, which proved to be a hard time for a lot of people, especially those experiencing homelessness. So we're very thankful for the amazing support that we've received from our community during this time. The surplus that we're reporting, the $431,000, is what has allowed us to set up this internally restricted fund that I've talked about. And like I said, this will help us to cover specific operating costs over the next 3 to 5 years. The internally restricted fund is explained more in note 9 of the audited financial statements as well. The last thing that I will mention is the prior period adjustment, which is outlined in note 11 of the audited financial statements. And you can all read through that and take the information that you wish. But basically, there was an issue identified during the current year where there was a misallocation of rental income between fiscal years. So there was about $8,000 of rental income that was recorded in the previous year that should have been deferred and recorded in the current fiscal year. This has been corrected in the March 31st, 2021 audited financial statements. So that is no longer an issue and has been reclassified and disclosed as such in the financial statements. And in addition, one other change is that our policy around in-kind donations was adjusted in the current year. So we're no longer reporting unreceipted donation revenues or expenses in our financial statements. This is not a requirement under our accounting standards. So the comparative figures have also been updated accordingly to be in line with this revised policy. And I'll just finish off by stating that the audited financial statements were approved by the Board of Directors on June 2nd, 2021. And during that same meeting, the Board of Directors also approved Lyle Tilly Davidson as the auditor for the next fiscal year ending March 31st, 2022.
Great, thank you so much, Chelsea. Any questions for anybody here? For either Tara or for Chelsea? Okay, hearing and seeing none, thank you very much. I appreciate all the hard work that was done by both the auditors and everyone on the committee. So thank you. I'd like to move on to our next committee board, and that is the Chair of Governance and the Governance Committee, and that's Jeff Franklin. Jeff, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Sorry about the terrible lighting in my office here. I hope you can see me okay. So I came on as governance chair in January. And over the last, I guess, 6 or so months, we've been continuing our work. It's been going on really since I joined the board in 2018 in sort of formalizing our board practices and policies and procedures. So some of the work this year that we've been doing in that regard relates to policies around incident reporting, board expectation, board evaluations, and things like that. Of course, our committee terms of reference continue to evolve, and we've got those in a good spot now. And probably most significantly for the year, we're just finishing a review of our bylaws. So not a lot of drastic changes there, but a good periodic review and update of those. And then just to acknowledge some of the change in the board composition over the last year. Dean Simmons has finished his term with the board, so we're grateful to Dean for his service. And we're joined on the board by David Boone, who's with us today. And I don't know if he's been recruited to one of the committees, but maybe he'll consider joining the governance committee.
Fundraising the stakeholders.
Oh, you're already spoken for. Okay.
They already got me.
Right. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to try to answer them. But the update is mostly of interest, I think, to the board members, and they hear from me fairly often.
Great, thank you so much, Jeff. And seeing no questions come in, I'd like to thank everybody on the governance committee for all the work this past year. I see a lot of great changes coming, so thank you, Jeff, for heading that up for everybody. Last committee update that I would like to hear from is from Deborah Page, and she is the chair of the Stakeholders and Relations Committee. So Deborah? Take her
Good
away.
evening, Hi, good evening, everyone. Thanks very much, Jamie. I have a few slides to share, so maybe if we can put those up on the screen, I'll go through them fairly quickly. Great, next slide. So I just wanted to start by identifying the members of the Stakeholder Relations Committee, which is myself as chair, and I am new to the committee. And it's quite a year to be taking it over, but I think it's an important year for sure, as well as our chair, Jamie O'Neill, Dennis Young, Jeremy Jackson. As has already been indicated, I scooped up David Boone fairly quickly, and also Linda Wilson and Jamie Bott as well from a staff perspective, and certainly helping round out our committee. Next slide. The purpose of our committee is really to build awareness, support, and commitment of governments, but also the community at large, and really in order to make sure that we have the kinds of support and finances that we need for current operations and also for future strategic goals for the organization moving forward. Next slide. When we talk about stakeholders, we're talking about a number of different people, a number of different groups of people, and certainly all levels of government for sure are some very important stakeholders for us. And there's been quite a bit of movement and change on that side this year that we're getting our heads around, certainly. But most importantly, I think that we would say our stakeholders start with our residents and clients, tenants and guests, and our employees, many of whom we would say are our lions, our board, who are here tonight in good numbers, students, donors who are growing, as you've heard, advocates, volunteers, neighbors, community, and again, as I mentioned, government colleagues. So we're in the process right now of mapping out all those stakeholders and really taking on a strategy to become a little bit more strategic in how we communicate with those folks on an ongoing basis, but more to come on that as we move forward. Next slide. On the funding of our operations, I think most people know that we do rely on both provincial and federal government sources for our operations. But important to note that the funding doesn't cover all of our costs, so fundraising is required. In 2020 and 2021, that fiscal year, last fiscal year, our fundraising goal was $320,000. In previous 2 years, we failed to achieve this goal, not I'm sure due to efforts, but there are a lot of things that go into that, and certainly awareness and understanding of our clientele is a big part of that. COVID put a huge cloud over the fundraising activities this year, causing us to cancel a lot of our regular fundraising events and plans. And so this had us very, very worried, for sure. Next slide. So from a COVID perspective, we had lots of different impacts, I think, which were mentioned, some were mentioned earlier, but we did, make some major renovations to 4 of our facilities to make them COVID safe. And so that meant fewer beds and putting in snugs, which I know Linda will talk a little bit more about. We also needed new generators for both the rebuilding and Barry House. We certainly needed to find new ways to acquire food and to acquire things like holiday support and others. We really looked at it, our clients didn't have the opportunity to stay the Blazes home, and neither did we as an organization. And when I say we, that really does go back to the employees and the management of Shelter Nova Scotia. Next slide. There were silver linings. COVID, as hard as it was our friend in some ways. People very much did contemplate their privilege and really began to notice more and more those in our society that go without. We've been aware, and the more people that become aware for whatever reason, I think is a very good thing. Certainly our tried and true supporters remained steady with us. They understand very well what our need is, and they continue to support us. We did secure more than $600,000 for renovations and snugs at the 4 facilities, and a little bit more about that to come. We did receive extra government support for cleaning supplies, snug extras, and some wage top-ups. Brunswick Street Missions made more than 1,000 meals for Metro Turning Point and the rebuilding. And we had 8 brand new donors came forward out of the blue. These were those folks who maybe became aware or wanted to divert funding that they usually put to one place and wanted to put it to a better cause, a more important cause, and we are grateful for that. And as Chelsea mentioned, we got $725,000 in donation came flowing in, which is more than double our goal. Those came from individuals, corporations, faith-based groups, foundations, and community groups. And we are eternally grateful for all of their support. And as you'll see, they'll factor very much into our steps moving forward. Next slide. As Linda did mention, and others have as well, last year was tiring and scary and frustrating and challenging, and the employees kept coming to work because they had to. And their clients and guests needed them. As you've heard, a lot of those steadfast frontline employees serving clientele that we would say are among those most difficult to serve in this area became known as lions. And the lions are stealthy. They go about their business quietly, but are fierce in the protection of theirs. And we are very much grateful that they were recognized, and we do thank the Ostrich Club for providing a much deserved and a very special meal for those employees. Next slide. And so what's next? Because I always do like to look forward, even though we're looking back. Our goals from a committee perspective moving forward are to maintain that fundraising, and it's not an unsubstantial objective. It's going to take a lot of hard work, but now that we've got them through the door, it's time to try to keep them here. We need to continue to educate and recognize new donors. And we need to really look at how do we make stakeholder engagement more strategic and more effective moving forward. We will always advocate for our clients, and we will continue to do so. And we do need to raise awareness of frontline wage inequities and the difficulty that poses for our clientele and the service that we can deliver to our clientele. And certainly, and most, I think, importantly, we need to maintain that reawakened public's awareness of those among us who go without. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Deborah. Lots of great information there for sure. Definitely liked the view forward. I think it's really important. I know as an AGM, we like to look at everything that has gone on in the past year, but looking forward, it's a great way of looking at it. And again, it's a big thank you to all those who contribute to helping all of us reach our fundraising goals so that we can provide even more services to our clients. So thank you, Deborah, for that update. And thank you.
I'm also supposed to introduce someone, which I totally forgot. I'm going to do that once you let me know I can.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, and also a big thank you to everyone in the stakeholder committee. So yes, please, if you can introduce our next guest speaker, that would be greatly appreciated. Thanks, Deborah.
I'm privileged to introduce the next guest speaker, who is Emma Prudis, who's the program manager at the Community Foundation of Nova Scotia, a stakeholder, a very, very important stakeholder to us. They are a new supporter for us and really made one of the biggest impacts that we saw last year, and it involved the Snugs. And I'll let Emma talk more about that.
Thank you so much, Deborah, and everyone at Shelter Nova Scotia. We were so humbled to be invited to be a part of tonight's event and to share a little bit more about what that relationship looks like, who the Community Foundation is, and how we look forward to continuing to serve our province. I do have some slides which I'm hoping will be shared shortly. Brilliant, thank you. And we can move on to the next slide. So the Community Foundation of Nova Scotia is an action center for philanthropy. We provide the knowledge and support for communities, charities, and citizens to realize their individual potential and collective possibilities. The term that we're using more and more lately is that we are an enabler. We provide the connections, we provide the relationships, and we try to build community through the networks that we forge. Our mission is to build strong, vibrant, and diverse communities throughout Nova Scotia by enabling and inspiring effective philanthropy. Next slide, please. We currently hold more than $11 million in endowed funds at the foundation, and it's the earnings off of those endowed funds that typically go out year after year of more than 100 funds that exist under our umbrella, including scholarships, donor-directed funds, etc. In 2020, 2021, we've been really fortunate to be able to partner more on some larger federal funding programs, including the Emergency Community Support Fund, which I'll speak about in just a moment, which has enabled us to be able to support a considerably larger number of organizations and to provide more rapid response to some of the emerging needs that were created or exacerbated by COVID-19. In 2020 alone, we did grant more than $3 million, which was made possible by a combination of private, corporate, and federal government dollars. Next slide, please. We see ourselves as a bit of an honest broker. The other term that I throw around sometimes is a matchmaker. So we exist somewhere between the donor or the fund holder and the charities doing the invaluable work on the ground. And so, you know, we bring donor dollars in the door. We look and we seek our community to see what projects and programming is taking place, and we support charities doing important work to create impact in Nova Scotia. So again, that honest broker, matchmaker role is what we're really privileged to be able to be. Next slide, please. So as I indicated earlier, in 2020, we were part of a network of community foundations across Canada, part of the Emergency Community Support Fund, which was a $350 million investment made by the Government of Canada to support vulnerable populations as they manage the impacts of COVID-19. And over 2 rounds, we issued 52 grants totaling over $1.5 million to charities across Nova Scotia, serving those most disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. Next slide, please. One of those organizations is Shelter Nova Scotia, and I have to share the immense excitement and interest we heard from our review committees about the SNUGS projects. We were able to support 2 different SNUG projects at 2 different Shelter Nova Scotia locations. And our review committee was blown away by the dignity, the respect, the safety, and the future-focused solution that the SNUGS provided. This was one of the most innovative solutions we saw come through the program, and a real opportunity to forge this new solution to a current problem, but a safety and respect solution for the future of our province. And I really can't say enough how impressed and honored we were to be able to support this project through the Emergency Community Support Fund. We see this as the start of relationship with Shelter Nova Scotia. As I said, we see ourselves as that matchmaker, honest broker. And so our role as a foundation is to get to know the organizations that are doing such phenomenal work in our province, and Shelter Nova Scotia is certainly one of those. And we are very hopeful that there will be other projects and opportunities for which we can collaborate and see succeed in Nova Scotia. Next slide, please. Really, again, so grateful to have been invited here today, and happy at any time to speak with anyone about the funding opportunities we have and how we might be able to work with both Shelter Nova Scotia and other organizations in the province serving during COVID-19 and beyond. The lion metaphor is such a beautiful one, and it's been so impressive to see the work that you folks have done this year. So a sincere round of applause to all of the board and staff at Shelter Nova Scotia for the incredible work that you have done. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Emma, for all the work that you do and dedication. And I, for one, it was great to hear all those numbers and learn a little bit more about your organization. So thank you so much. Is anybody here? Don't see any questions coming in from the guests, but any questions here from board members that they'd like to ask Emma at this time? No, seeing none. Thank you so much, Emma. We really appreciate it. Thank you for being here. All right. Now to introduce our fearless leader, the lion. What's the head lion? What's that person called? The big. Well, we'll just call you the big cheese then. No, we'll just. How about we just call her the executive director for Shelter Nova Scotia, Linda Wilson. The floor is all yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. And thank you everybody for coming this afternoon. It's I didn't expect to be this emotional, but I'm pretty emotional. But before I begin, I'd like to say thank you again to Emma for coming today, and also to Daniel Holland, the executive director, and all Emma's colleagues at the Community Foundation of Nova Scotia. Just the fact that you understood the significance of the changes that we had to make in the facilities was a gift in itself. And then providing the funds to do it, and we were able to do it so quickly. You'll see everybody received an annual report, and in the report there's all kinds of information in there about the snugs and really good pictures of them and things like that. But those snugs were a dream before COVID, and so it wasn't like we just pulled that out of our hats. Tim Nobes, who's our facilities manager, had been working on this for a while, and then we had it on the back burner because we just didn't know how we'd ever get it done. And then when the time came and public health said that bunk beds were no longer to be used because you can't, bunk beds are just too close together. All of a sudden, I can't even think of the language that we've been using for 15 months. You can't keep 6 feet apart when you're in a bunk bed with somebody. So the Community Foundation has changed the reality for Metro Turning Point and Fleming House forever. And not just for kind of our history, but the people who will come there on a go forward basis are going to have and are having a very different, dignified experience than we were able to provide in the past. So page 12 and 13 on the annual report has the whole story on it, so I won't go on. But I'd just like to say thank you again, Emma. Like, the world has changed, so thank you. I'd also like to take a moment now to thank Braden Siliker, Stacey Dort, and Jamie Lynn Butt for all the work and coordination that went into holding this annual general meeting. They're there very kind of quietly in the background, making sure that we get through this well. So thank you. Everybody has kind of already given my report and the things that they've had to say, but basically my report is in the package, but I'll just give you the highlights. At the onset of COVID-19, we had to work really hard to try to understand what was happening around us, just like everybody else did. The board, the employees, the government, and our service provider partners pulled together. We really did, to keep the people we serve and our employees safe. And meanwhile, the public showed up in ways we never imagined, we never experienced. It was unbelievable. We couldn't make it up. So thank you, everybody. Although those of us who've worked in the field for a long time have always tried to work toward overcrowded facilities, whether they were shelters or community residential facilities. The overcrowded conditions were accepted as a necessary economic reality. And even though we knew it was wrong, and there was, so again, as Deborah said, COVID was our friend in that basically we're able to say no more overcrowded facilities, and replacing the bunk beds with private sleeping areas, as you know, we called snugs, significantly reduced overcrowding and has created a healthier environment in every way. It was a huge relief for the people who use our service and a huge relief for our employees. But in the meantime, the hidden homelessness and a lack of affordable housing became even more obvious. The growing crisis became part of more conversations as tents and wooden crisis shelters appeared in visible locations across the city, and people wondered why. And that horrible reality, I hope, is going to move us to big change. There are answers, and I'm proud to say that Shelter Nova Scotia is a member of the Housing for All working group and a sponsor of the subsequent report called Keys to a Housing Secure Future for All Nova Scotians, and you'll be able to get the link from the report. And it was released by the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. So basically, to get through 2020, we had to be flexible, creative, responsive, and patient. Gratitude is one of our core competencies here, and it's a theme in this year's report. And as an organization, we work to further embed our gratitude practice, and I noticed it all over the place. People leaning into their gratitude practice in conversations, in messages that they delivered, in posts around the facilities. I've seen bulletin boards with messages to employees from the people we serve, from the tenants, guests, residents, and clients, thanking the employees. Board members sent messages to employees, and employees reminded each other every day why they were grateful to be together in this very strange and challenging time. And together we got through. And while we worked through this past challenges, our services have improved, and we took steps toward new inspiring solutions. We will never forget this. And these are, what memories are made of. But also what change and grit is made of. And we are there. I couldn't be prouder or happier to be part of Shelter Nova Scotia during this strange time. And I know that we can do whatever it takes. I'm positive about that. Maybe one of the most memorable statements made through the height of the pandemic came from Premier Stephen McNeil when he told us to stay the blazes home. And here at Shelter Nova Scotia, we went right to, how do you stay the blazes home when you have no home? Best-selling author and photojournalist Len Wag was caught by the Premier's statement as well, and set out to chronicle what staying the blazes home meant across the province. Dispatches from Nova Scotia during the COVID-19 pandemic, Stay the Blazes Home, is a photo-filled collection of stories about Nova Scotians' resilience during the pandemic. And he included Shelter Nova Scotia's experience in the book. And his book sold out in the first 2 weeks. It's in its third printing and has become a national bestseller. And we are on page 92, if you're wondering. You can order the book from our website. Len Wag, here with us tonight, is an award-winning Canadian photographer, author, and presenter, a visual storyteller for over 3 decades. He's well known for capturing the majestic beauty of his native Nova Scotia wildlife, salt-strewn landscapes, and his assignments have taken him all the way from the deserts of Ethiopia to the cockpit of a CF-18 over Europe and all across Canada. Len's work has been published in the New York Times, Maclean's, Time Magazine, and other renowned publications. We are so proud and pleased that Len is available to join us here today to speak to us about his experience of people in Nova Scotia staying the blazes home. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Len Wag right now.
Hey everyone, great to be here. Thank you very much. Are we all good? We can hear? We're good? Great. Yeah. So look, I wanted to start off with saying thank you for everything that you do. Certainly Shelter Nova Scotia is one of the groups that, it requires a lot of work with volunteers, and it requires a lot of work with the people who work there and a lot of heart. And certainly that's what I've seen from your organization during this whole thing. So to you, thank you very much. I'm humbled to be here. And just to kind of start off with, so books don't happen this fast. Usually, if you think about, I'd like to do a book on. You're looking at probably 18 months to 2 years before this thing happened. You have to you put together a proposal, or you put together a manuscript. You get something, you got to find something that goes into a marketing, it goes into a queue on whether or not it's going to work. And that's how things go. And then you have like a year to work on it, 3 or 4 months to design it, and then it goes off to a printer somewhere, and then it comes back and magically appears in a store. That's not what happened this time. I was sitting there like everybody else. We were sitting around home and kind of looking and thinking. I was online one night and I saw a mask picture from 1919. And I looked and everybody was walking around wearing masks. Now, can you imagine walking around, like seeing pictures of people walking and wearing masks. Can you imagine seeing that in everyday society? I mean, certainly, I couldn't. Could we all? And look what we have now. But I looked at that and I thought, I wonder how future generations are going to see us. As I was looking at these images, I thought, how are we going to be seen? So I called the publisher, and this was within 2 or 3 days of our first lockdown back in March, before those words were said. And I said, who's doing the pandemic book? And they said, well, we're not doing a pandemic book. And I said, I think we can do a pandemic book. Anyway, within a week, we were doing a pandemic book. And as I started this, I started photographing empty streets and, build closed buildings and things like that. And very quickly, I learned that that wasn't where the story of this pandemic would be. The story of the pandemic would be through the people that lived it. So I started kind of making a list on, who could be in this book, who would be interesting, who's doing a real, an amazing job out there. And certainly Shelter Nova Scotia came as one of them. And I did call Linda and, I asked her, I said, what can we talk? And we did talk. And instead of me talking, I'll just let kind of people's words talk. But, she said that we work in crisis. We've been trained to work in crisis, but this is crisis on top of crisis. And then, kind of ending off, she said, we're all in a storm, but we're not in the same boat. And those experiencing homelessness, they don't even have a boat. So, I thought of that and I thought, okay, those are amazing words. So we put those into the story, and then I started going on. So I started finding people, more people, more people, more people. And as I went on, I started finding that I had like so many. And then April 18th happened, and I was April 18th. It's one of those days where you kind of remember where you were. And I remember where I was. I was sitting with Michael Lightfoot at Lightfoot Vineyards, and I wasn't drinking wine. We were doing an interview, and we were talking about how his grandparents had kind of grown up and leaned into hard times. And then he told me about that story, and I came back and I was kind of looking at it. And then that evening happened, and the next night happened, and throughout the whole thing, the following week, I found myself working in Portapique, and then working in Wentworth, and working in Shubenacadie and things like that. So I found myself working kind of through there, and this book just kind of went by the wayside. And 2 or 3 weeks later, all those interviews that I had done, I hadn't looked at. I didn't look at them. I didn't read them, and because it wasn't. And I think, like everybody, after April 18th, a lot of the problems that we were having just weren't really problems anymore. So I didn't really think about deadlines, and I didn't think about the book. And then I realized that certainly you made a commitment, you sign a contract, you make a commitment, and there's people that are working down the line that that there's jobs do depend on things that we do. So I went in and I sat down and I read one of the interviews. And on April 4th, I had gone to Easter Mass. And I'm not a churchgoer, as say, but I did go to church that day to talk to a couple of priests about what Easter Mass was like with nobody in the crowd. Now, again, you got to remember, a year ago, that was unheard of. That there would be a mass and there would be nobody in the pews. And then they live streamed that. So I talked to them about that. And then I sat down that night and I went in and I looked and I thought, I gotta get going here. So I read this quote. It was Father Claude was his name, and he leaned forward and he said, "COVID-19 is like a darkness. And it's not the darkness that defines the limits of darkness, but it's the light that defines the darkness." And I read that and I sat back and I said, that's it. That's it. COVID-19 was a darkness. Portapique 19 was a darkness. But that darkness doesn't define who we are. We need to be the light. So then I just started going and I started getting at this, and I started meeting a lot more people and doing a lot more interviews and trying to get back at it to get it done. So then I met a person that you may know, Mariah Kearney, and I believe that she may have helped out a little bit. And she is truly, truly, truly. I'm very proud that I got to meet her. I'm very proud that she was part of this. And I see her as a mentor and a role model for a lot of people, myself included. But I want to tell you, I want to just read you a quote from Mariah. And she said, "In my personal life, I've had some incredible moments, being a mother, being married, traveling around the world. But in the midst of the pandemic, in the darkest time for many people, this has been the most amazing moment in my business, the most impactful, exciting, emotional." She looked at the stairway and listens to the bustle upstairs as Stay the Blazes Home t-shirts crew are working away. And she said, "In the darkest of the times, we had the greatest light." So, when we look at those darkness, and darkness started to be kind of a theme that happened when I talked to people. And, it was just, people kept coming back to the light, the individual light. And I realized that, that old quote about, it takes one person, or it doesn't take a crowd to change things. In fact, it only takes one person, and that's all it's ever been. And that's kind of what I started to realize, is that it was a bunch of individuals that made us feel good about ourselves and good about where we live and the response to what we did to COVID and to the whole pandemic. Because really, it is how society treats the most vulnerable is what a society is all about. When you look at us and what we did, I think that a lot of people come to understand that this is a pretty good place to live in. And there was so much sadness throughout it. And I talked to Charlene, whose father died, and her father died in Northwood, and she didn't get to see him. She didn't get to say goodbye. She did, but she got to say goodbye with an iPad. And she said, "I made a promise to care for him until he died. And I tried my best, Darlene and me," that's her sister. "I guess that was my biggest regret, that I couldn't be there with him when he died." And then she talked about talking to him on an iPad and how that conversation went. And when she was talking to him on an iPad, I realized that, and these funny connections started happening all through the book. There was Andrea Jenkins, an acute care nurse, and she wasn't on that phone call, or she could have been, but privacy. She wouldn't tell me, but I didn't ask. And she was on the end of the iPads in some cases where those last conversations were had, and that's what that's what she was doing. And when I started making these connections, I realized that although Charlene felt that her father was alone, her father wasn't alone, because he was with people that cared for him. And, I think you can probably see the parallel in the business that you're in, that people, although they don't have a place to live, they're not alone, because they do have people that care for them. And that's what makes what you do so important. So when I talked to Andrea, I asked her, I said, what about the signs that you see? What about these posters? What about the heroes that, the things that people call you a hero? What do you think about that? And she said to me, she said, if you're looking for heroes, she said, I'm highly trained, I'm paid well, I have all the PPE that I need, and I know what I'm getting into, and I know how to protect myself. She said, if you want to talk about heroes, talk about the 17-year-olds that are working in grocery stores who don't have that, who don't know what's out there waiting for them. But I'm going to close with her words, because I think her words were some of the most poignant in the book. And she said, so I had talked to her about what does she think about being a hero. She said, it was very humbling, but that's the job. You are there to be a help. We are all called to do and be what the world needs us to do and be. Our response to that call may vary, but as none is too insignificant to not make a difference, and none is so remarkable to warrant being called a hero. And I'm gonna leave that there. Again, thank you for all the work you do, and thank you very much for the opportunity to talk.
Great. Thank you so much. Yes, that was amazing. That was amazing. Thank you so very much for being here with us this afternoon, this evening, and for creating this wonderful and amazing book. Like Linda said, we do have a link to it on our website, but I think, just as you said, like the usual process to get something like this together, and the way that you did it in such a short time, speaks to the need for something like this to exist, and really glad that you had that motivation to take those pictures and to get those quotes and put the book together. So thank you so very, very much for your time and effort today. Okay, is there any questions? Does anybody have any questions for Len at this time? No questions. I guess we're a silent group, which is not normal. At all. I have a question though for you, Len, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So you mentioned a couple of quotes, people that you interviewed. Did you interview, what's one of the most memorable interviews you did from an education standpoint, like within the, how COVID affected people in schools?
Well, that's kind of funny because I happen to have somebody in the house, and I only walked through the classroom a couple of times, but no, it was, and I mean, from an education point of view, what had to happen with teachers, and I think a lot of them had to change, like they had to change and become technologically, like you imagine like Zoom or Google Classroom or all those things, all that work that had to happen when you're used to being up front, and there's so many different ways you can teach, but I don't think that any of them really got into teaching over a computer. But that was a good interview. I had to make sure, when you live with somebody that has a master's in literacy, you have to make sure you spell the words right. Well, a few of them, right? But no, that was it was interesting to see the kids, and I think that her last quote was, it was heartbreaking to not be able to hug the kids on the last day of school, and just to see them kind of online, because you see such a connection between student and teacher. So yeah, that was probably one of the hardest interviews that I had to do.
Yes. Well, thank you again. Good luck. We're looking forward to your next work.
Number 2 is the deadline is 15 days. 15 days. Part 2.
Can you tell us what it is?
It's this. Well, it's going to be called We Rise, but this is a book about it's about everybody that you encountered in the health system. It really is. I'd like to. It's almost like a love letter into the healthcare system, because you look at it's about doctors that worked in ICU. It's psychologists that help out the healthcare workers. It's the people that are on the front lines giving the needles. It's the people that are working in mental health. But it's a lot of other people. It's like Richard and Debbie, who do the sign language every day. They certainly have an incredible story to tell. So there's a lot of stories like that. So it's going to be called We Rise, and the deadline's the same. Get it done in months, and it'll be coming in October. Yeah. So that's it.
Great. Look forward to seeing it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Right. Take care. Thank you, Len. Okay, so that concludes our guest speakers and our items that we have listed on today's agenda for the 2020-2021 annual general meeting for Shelter Nova Scotia. So I would like to close by, again, thanking all of our guest speakers for coming today and sharing your story, and sharing your expertise, and all the things that you have done to support our communities, and Shelter Nova Scotia is very much appreciated. So we definitely thank you for that. a huge thank you has to go out again to all the employees for Shelter Nova Scotia. We wouldn't definitely not be in the position we are in without you and your continued support and your efforts throughout, every day that you come to work every day. And it's not just in this past year, but all in the past years and the years to come as well. So we thank you for your hard work, for the fundraisers, the donors. We wouldn't exist. We wouldn't be able to provide the services without you. To our funders, provincial and federal government, what you are contributing to is an amazing cause. I've been on the board now for, I think I'm going on 7 years now. I always get those dates mixed up, but I feel like I've always been part of Shelter Nova Scotia and with the employees. And, the work that we do is second to none. And I'm very proud to be a board member, as I know the other board members are. So I'd like to close out, seeing that there's no questions or comments. I'd like to close out this annual general meeting and thank everybody for participating today. And thank you for coming. Take care, everybody. Thank you.